Jonathan joined us too, it looks like. Oh, there's Richard. Good.
And then Jim is also here.
Great.
So I will go ahead and call roll, and then we could do the pledge, and then we could go ahead and start with our agenda. So Chair Cowcott. Okay, he's absent. Vice Chair McClatchy.
Here.
Commissioner Corres.
Here.
Commissioner Fry. Absent. Commissioner Callback.
Here.
Commissioner Martin. Absent. Commissioner Richmond.
Here.
So we have quorum with 5 present and 3 absent. So do you, okay, Vice Chair, would you like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd love to. Thank you. Everyone, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we have, do we have any members of the public here that we would like to recognize? There.
I do not see any. I do see that Commissioner James Martin is joining us now.
Okay, great. Okay, so going through our first item for consideration would be the approval of the June 21st minutes. Did everyone have a chance
Vice Chair, would it be possible to switch the order of the items and have the presentation by Jim?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is Jim. Do we? I don't see him. Yeah, I don't see him in the lineup here.
He's right there.
Oh, I just am missing one person, a couple people. Okay.
Yes. Vice Chair, Anita Enander here. If we're going to change the order of the agenda, technically we need a motion.
Okay.
Hey, Martha, I bet you we can move the minutes just as fast as we can change the order.
Okay.
With
sure.
one motion. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from June?
I'll move the minutes.
Second, Gary.
All right, great. Okay, so now on to our presentation.
Thank you, Commission, for having me tonight. And I plan to talk about the park and lieu fees. And I'm not sure if we will, if you would make a recommendation to the council or not at the end of this, but perhaps once we go through the presentation, we can make that determination at the end. I'm not sure if that needed to be discussed or kind of stated in the agenda to make that recommendation. But if not, I'm happy to come back next month. We're likely going to take this to the council in September. So if it's okay, I'll share my screen.
Yes, I will go ahead and unshare.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Are we asked to advise or approve the park and lieu?
I believe it would be advise or recommend.
I believe that's right. I believe the city council has to approve.
Right. That's correct. It would be a public hearing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So let's see if you can see I've got two screens here, so hopefully you see the presentation mode.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, good. So tonight I'm going to give you an overview of park and lieu fees. I don't think I've ever presented to this commission on park and lieu.
Not in the past 3 or 4 years that I know of.
Yeah, I've been here just over 2 years, so yeah,
Okay.
I don't think I have. So I'll give a little background and purpose and kind of show how the fees are calculated. Summarize the city council recommendation that I'll be providing to the council, and show a comparison to other cities and how our fees compare, look at past and projected revenue, and then take any questions and allow you to advise or recommend at the end. So park and lieu fees were authorized by the 1975 Quimby Act through the state of California, and it allows cities to charge new residential development for community park land. The park land valuation calculation is based on 3 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents, the value of real estate in a given city, and the number of residents per household. The Los Altos Muni Code Title 13 kind of summarizes or details what's required. Planning Commission and City Council recommends, approves conditions of approval upon approving a tentative map. A tentative parcel map or a tentative tract map is a map showing the layout of a proposed subdivision, including the general description of the associated infrastructure. And the approved tentative parcel map or tentative tract map also sets conditions such as access, frontage, grading, improvements, storm water protection, and so forth, which must be met before the final parcel map or tract map can be filed. An approved tentative parcel or tract map does not divide the property, rather it sets the conditions under which the division can occur. To actually divide the property, you must file a parcel or tract map. So that's a little background on that. Ultimately, the final subdivision or parcel map subdivider is required to dedicate land, pay a fee in lieu thereof, or a combination of both at the option of the city. So the purpose of the in-lieu fees are used for providing park or recreational facilities reasonably related to serving the subdivision from which the fees are collected. And so that would include the purchase of land, improving existing parkland or park and recreation purposes. If the city council deems that sufficient land is available for the subdivision, then fees may be used for buying equipment related to parks and rec, or constructing improvements in neighborhood or district park and rec facilities. So this is a summary of how the calculation works. For single family detached homes or residents, you have the 3 acres per 1,000 residents that was set by the state, the Quimby Act. So that gives you a factor of 0.003 acres per resident. And our Muni code assumes a value of 2.7 residents per household. And so that factor with the 2.7 gets us another factor of 0.0081. And then we multiply that times 1 acre of land, or the value thereof actually. And then it's the same thing for multifamily residents. The only difference is that it's assumed that 1.7 residents live in each household. So the factor is a little smaller for residents. It's interesting because I looked up the census, the previous census, not the latest census, but the US Census has 2.86 persons per household between 2014 and 2018. So that would actually raise this number and generate more revenue for the city. And then California actually had 2.96 persons per household in their census numbers. But I think we'll look at this next year once the U.S. Census numbers are, kind of fully published, and then I think the city attorney and I need to kind of look through the Muni code and see if there are any other updates that are necessary, because I don't think it's been updated for a while. So the calculations that I did, the way we normally do it is about each year we have an independent real estate appraisal firm appraise the land value in Los Altos, and they do comps in Los Altos and also look at some of the surrounding cities and come up with a value. So in conclusion, for this year, the last appraisal we did was in February of this year. The fair market value of an acre of land came out to about $11.2 million, or $257 per square foot. So that our current fees, which haven't been raised since I believe early 2019, they're based on a land value of 9.58 million, or 220 per square foot. Last October of 2020, I had recommended the council we raise fees, and they actually asked that we look at low-income housing and possible waivers for that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But they didn't approve the fees, but the fees I had recommended last October had a land value of 10.78 million, or $247.50 per square foot, and that was based on a February 2020 appraisal, so a year earlier than this year's appraisal. So when I did my calculations, based on the most latest appraisal we have, the recommended park and lieu fees would be $90,900 for a single family detached home, and $57,200 for a multifamily residence. And so, as you can see with my notes there, you can see the progression of how the fees have increased since then, or to get to this number. So the existing fees are that for single family residents are the 77.5 number. I should use my cursor here, right here, which I guess, oops, pardon me, which actually were approved or based on a November 2018 appraisal. And so the recommended single family fees will go up 17%, but that's from an appraisal that's almost 3 years old. Had the fees been updated last year, the increase would have been 4%. And then it's the same for multifamily residents.
Jim, again, why weren't they approved last year?
The council had some questions, and I know Anita's on, and she can jog her memory as well, but I think it may have been Anita or maybe Jeannie had brought up the question about affordable housing, and would it be possible to waive fees for affordable or inclusionary housing units? And so they asked staff and the city attorney to do that research and come back with a recommendation on that, findings and a recommendation, which
has that been done?
Yes, it was actually completed this month. And so I as of last week, I got a notice from the city attorney with kind of their evaluation, and I'll get into that in a minute.
Jim, let me just add, I agree with Jim's recollection. And I think had we had any idea that we were delaying things this long, we might have tried to figure out a different way to approach it, but it is what it is, and we're looking forward to it coming back soon.
Yeah, I won't get into why there was a delay, but yeah.
It's okay. But it sounds like we're on path to consider it again. Okay,
that's
good.
correct. Yeah. So this kind of summarizes what I just said about the council meeting, and they said it continued to a future council meeting date uncertain, and it was, so as I mentioned, given that decision, the fees remained at the early 2019 levels, and then in September of this year, I'll be taking an item to the council to raise the fees to the levels discussed here, the 90,000 and 57,000. So what, in summary, I've got a longer kind of notice from the city attorney, but this is kind of what the summary of what they said. In terms of flexibility to alter, reduce, or eliminate various fees for affordable or inclusionary housing, their findings were not charging fees to affordable units needs to be part of a citywide policy and built into the city's fee schedule as $0 or no fee, rather than referring to it as a waiver of fees. Since the fees are like a tax, you get into Prop 218 issues by waiving fees, which require voter approval and so forth. So it would need to be no fee. And then,
how are we defining affordable units? What's the formula for that?
Well, I think that's something that we need to discuss with the council, and because there's a range of I guess affordable units and so forth, and that's something I need more time to prepare by September. And if that's a discussion you would like to have, I can do that for your August meeting, or possibly September, depending on the timing of the meetings.
Jim, can I maybe help out just a little bit on that?
Yes.
There are projects, the city has a requirement for multifamily housing that above 4 units, the developer is required to provide what are defined in the state law as below market rate housing. They're at various categories that are where people are eligible, whether they're for rental or purchase, depending on the family's percentage revenue, their income as a percentage of the median income in the county, the area. And those are then defined as either moderate or low or very low or very, very low income. So there's a series of state statutes that define all of that. And because we require that those units be included as a part of a development, that is, we do not allow developers to pay in-lieu fees instead of building them as a part of their multifamily development, then the question arises, should we be, as a way to encourage the inclusion of more units, more below market rate units, or more affordable units? Those terms get tossed around kind of casually and interchangeably. That's what led to the question, is if we reduced or eliminated the fees on those affordable units, does that demonstrate to the state, which they're always looking for, as ways that we are trying to encourage additional below market rate housing? So maybe that helps just a little bit.
That helps a lot.
Thank you, Anita. Yeah, the affordable housing area is something I don't get involved with hardly, and that's more of a planning thing that.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd bail you out a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Way out of Jim's wheelhouse. He is not responsible for that stuff.
Exactly. You know, you want to talk sewers, I can do that. No, so I think once we get this to council, I'll probably recruit Guido or one of his staff to kind of help discuss this portion of the in-lieu fees. And then the other thing is that the revenue we collect, like if we're gonna reduce fees or not have fees for a certain type of inclusionary or affordable housing, we're not allowed to have the other market rate units subsidize those. And so basically, you know, in round numbers, if the city were to make $1 million on a multi-residential project in park and lieu fees, and there's 20% affordable housing units, then the city would actually only be able to collect $800,000 from the market rate units and zero from the 20% of low income housing. So it would be foregoing $200,000 in that example, rather than passing it on to the other units. So looking at comparisons to other cities, last fall, this is the chart that I showed the council, and before the next council meeting, I'm going to update it, but I've updated it with that blue line. So if you look at what we recommended to the council last fall, Los Altos was about the second most expensive, had the second most expensive park and lieu fees with our neighboring cities. And with our existing fees, you know, we're about fourth, but even with the increase that I'm proposing, the 90,000 and the 57,000, we're right about second. And so I need to do some research and see, yeah, I'm sure some of these fees have gone up with the other towns, and we may or may not still be in second place at that point. This just gives you an idea. And then this gives you an idea of the fees that we've collected the past 14 years. I'll just let you absorb that a little bit.
Jim, this might be obvious, but why is it so, chunky that in some years it's zero and then others it's, well over $1 million? Is that just based on when the development happens?
That's correct. Yeah. And then this one is hot off the press from Steve Golden, one of our planners, who kind of tracks the anticipated revenue we're going to get based on permit applications for housing developments. And so, based on a number of factors and footnotes, we're anticipating up to nearly $20 million in revenue. In terms of projects that have been approved, we're looking at about $16 million in revenue. These are rough numbers that I don't know that they've been truly, kind of reviewed to the nth degree, but it's basically this is the same chart I showed last October. Nothing has changed.
Hey, Jim?
Yeah.
Real quick, I thought 5150 that you weren't going to charge park in lieu fees for a trade-off with they were going to build a park.
That's my understanding. Perhaps Anita might have an update on that.
Well, that was in the newspaper.
Sure.
Okay.
So let me take Jim off the hook on this one too. When council approved this, it also approved and asked that the developer and the city try to reach some agreement on the developer who had acquired a parcel on Distal that is tangential, kitty corner tangential to 5150. To develop as a park. And the way that would work, and I'm putting this all in very conditional tense on purpose, the way that would work is that if the city reached an agreement with the developer to do that, the developer would develop the park, hand it over to the city, and the amount that they spent acquiring the land and developing the park would be netted against the anticipated revenue that they would otherwise pay if they were paying an all in lieu. And if there were any difference still owing to the city, they would pay that difference in cash. That project, as you probably know from reading the paper, is in question, and the parcel that would be the park is also in question as to its status, because it's all tied up in litigation. And I don't think anybody right now knows whether or when or how the 5150 parcel's ownership will be determined. And even when that's determined, whether they will end up somehow acquiring the Distal parcel where they would continue to have an interest in providing the park as a partial, if not full offset for the anticipated revenue, is a giant question mark, but at least you know what the factors are that are driving that. The other thing I want to mention is the very bottom line here where there's 3 stars on Distal Circle. The city has in principle agreed, and the city council has a resolution where we agreed to forego, I think something in the neighborhood of an estimate of $5 million in fees for the Distal Circle project as part of our contribution to making that project, which is an all affordable project, pencil out and work. And so that $4 million plus is, I won't say it would necessarily be zero, but I wouldn't count on any of it.
Can I ask a question? That's Gary. On Distal, isn't that the piece of property that the city was looking at acquiring to do this development, and El Camino Hospital, same thing?
That's a piece of property that was owned, 330 Distal Circle is a piece of property that was owned by Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space.
Right. That's the one, yeah.
The city and other, it came up under Excess Lands Act from state of California. And so a number of public agencies, including the city, indicated we might be interested in it. We put a letter of interest in. The ultimate decision was that the county purchased it. And the county and the city are working together to make the project work.
Good.
So that's one of the reasons why we're tossing in basically foregone fees as our financial contribution, because we did not acquire the parcel and then contribute the parcel. The county did that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does. I signed the letter for El Camino. I was chair of El Camino Hospital at the time and signed that letter expressing interest in that. I just want to make sure it's the same property. But the county bought it or owns it now.
Yes, the county ultimately acquired it.
Great, good.
Correct.
That's where I was going. Okay, thank you.
Thanks again, Anita. I think this is helpful for making adjustments for when we take this to council. I received this from community development today, and so I'll work with them to kind of explain those, Distal and 5150 a little better.
Good.
So, recommendation: does the Financial Commission recommend to the council to increase park and lieu fees to the following amounts? So that's something for consideration tonight.
May I ask a question before we talk about a recommendation?
Of course, yeah, I was going to have a Q&A first. Yes.
Oh, good, thank you. How are we doing in terms of our acres per 1,000 residents? Are we in compliance with that right now? Do you want me to ask that a different way?
That's a good question. So are you asking if we have enough parkland?
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know offhand. I can find out.
An excellent question.
I don't believe that our parkland has changed in a long time, although we did acquire from the county a chunk, if not all, of Lincoln Park that we previously were leasing from the county. But I don't know, the recalculation on that is something that would be in Donna's wheelhouse. I'm sure we are still below the standard.
Okay, if we are below the standard, and I know we have funds in the park and lieu bucket, do we have plans to buy any parkland? Do we have any plans to get in compliance?
That's a question.
I'm pitching for staff, and if we had our finance chief here, and we look forward to having a new finance chief who's going to come up to speed on all of this, so that I'm not in the position of answering these questions in the future, because it's really something staff should answer. But we don't want Jim to be trying to do things that aren't in his wheelhouse. There is a master plan for parks done back in 2012, 13, somewhere in there, which specifies that high priority for acquiring a park in North Los Altos. And there has not been a successful situation where the city could acquire land for a park up until now, which is one of the reasons I think I'll say that council was interested in doing the situation with 5150 when the developer presented us with that possibility. But there is, to the best of my knowledge right now, nothing that is available where there's a possibility of doing anything. But the staff, the community development staff, is always on the lookout and has their ear to the ground for, and has some notions of things they'd love to be able to grab for us, but no dice yet.
So are you looking for conclusion on this, Martha? I mean, I
did have one more question, and my fellow commissioners, do we, that $90,000 and the $57,000 that you had said that would be the new amounts, I didn't actually understand how you calculated that, but if other people understand that, then I'm fine.
I'm happy to try to explain again.
Okay.
Let me share the screen again here. Sorry, my computer's frozen. 1 second. So this is how it's laid out in our municipal code. So you take 3 acres per 1,000 residents. And so this is for a single family detached home situation. The code assumes 2.7 residents per household. So you multiply those two factors, and it gives you a value of this factor, 0.0081. which I should have put the units right after it, but that 0.081, you know, when you do the math, it turns out to be, well, let's see here. We got
I think yeah. So
Yeah.
0.0081, and then you multiply that times the 11,200,000, which is the fair market value of an acre. That's the fair market value as of 2020, 2021.
As of February of 2021.
Okay. And does that sound right? Okay.
I also have a question. Is there an advantage to being high priced in park and lieu fees, given all of these other constraints we have trying to get affordable housing within the city?
Could you say that again? Because I think I have a similar question.
If we're going to be at on the first take, it seems logical to have high park and lieu fees in the sense we gain revenue, but it seems to be a disincentive for having affordable housing, and we end up having to subsidize that. Has anybody looked at, is it really beneficial to the city to raise these fees given all the other constraints we have?
Well, I think that's why the council asked us to look at the legality of waiving fees, which, yeah, we can't waive, but we could defer fee, or, you know, not charge fees or charge lesser fees for affordable housing. So I think for that would be an incentive for affordable housing projects, I would think, if there's zero fee for in lieu. You know, there's a disadvantage to the city in terms of the revenue, but does that answer your question? Or?
Well, it sort of answers the question in the sense that I think the question or the answer has to be quite complex, because we have several forces working upon us. We have the desire to have more revenue, but then it sounds like we have some pretty severe state requirements with regard to the affordable housing, and trying to incentivize that by dropping the fees, but we can't do a waiver of the fees on a particular project. And so I guess my question is are we helping ourselves by actually raising these fees, given all of the constraints we have? And why are we so much higher in fees than the other cities? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would think if we're going to not charge fees to affordable housing units, it behooves us to kind of keep up with the market for all of the market rate units being developed. You know, because we certainly need the revenue that will not be charged to affordable housing. I'm kind of relying on the appraisers, you know, the terms of where we rank. I mean, I think Los Altos, it's no secret that we have some of the highest, you know, one of the highest zip codes in the nation for land values. And so personally, I'm not surprised, but I don't know, perhaps I actually don't live in Los Altos, so I'd be curious if that ranking is a surprise to this group.
No, I think the appraisals are right on target. That's not really my question, in the sense that the appraisals, I think, make a lot of sense. But I'm just asking, and perhaps it's too complex of an algorithm, because you have so many variables with respect to the affordable housing and all the constraints that I've heard, and the difficulty trying to walk that tightrope of having the affordable multi-tenant housing.
So this is Gary. Can I go back to what Anita said? I think she hinted at that being one of the discussion factors for whenever it is, September, because we are under the gun to build more affordable housing units. And how do you judge? And this may be for Anita to, maybe she's thinking about it. How do you judge what that trade-off is in the developer's mind? Do they care? Do they is it just a math problem? Or you say, hey, I could go to one of the other cities and they would charge less for this. Now there's a lot of factors like availability and cost of the land and on and on and on. But can I ask Anita, is that something you're contemplating trying to sort out, or is a factor at all, or do we just maximize it out?
It would probably be best if I don't comment, other than to say that, yes, it's very complex. Yes, the calculus is complex. And I don't think there are any easy answers. So I'm more interested in hearing your deliberations. And I think council is looking for your deliberations and your considerations on that.
Yeah.
And I should stop there.
Okay.
Well, I'll continue with an opinion. I think we ought to maybe not maximize, but increase our revenue via this park in lieu fee calculation. And does that go to 90 or 56 or whatever? I don't know. I would, without being a grubby venture capitalist, I would go maximize it out. But I'd like to hear the opposite of that too.
If I could weigh in on the alternative. Number one, I totally agree with zero fees for low-income housing.
Yeah.
But I actually think the fee system itself is a spiraling, self-fulfilling revenue grab. The city is not putting in parkland with the money. It's simply a mechanism to make housing ever increasingly more expensive. So it will create a barbell effect on the distribution of housing. So to invoke one of our favorite statements, our children can't afford to live here unless we pay for their homes. And this mechanism makes it ever more difficult for our children to be able to live here. And the city is not, does not need the revenue. It is just a mechanism to produce more funds that could allow us to kind of redecorate more buildings and make housing ever more expensive. That's my counter.
Yeah. I hear you on that. In fact, I kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm Gary, Mark. I'm kind of in Anita's benefit or burden. I think this is barbell's the right word for this. Okay, so and I would urge the city to kind of learn its lesson on making it up as you go along. You have an ordinance, right? And the ordinance says on an annual basis that the Director of Public Works will provide this appraisal to the council to do with it as they see fit. So I would urge you to do it. If in fact you want to change the scheme, and I'm using the word scheme in the British sense, not the New Jersey sense, but if you want a different scheme, then let's have a different scheme, but let's create an objective, here's the rate card scheme, and let's resist the temptation to turn everything into the purchase or sale of a rug, which I think is just going to get you in trouble. Got us in trouble before. We all know what the list is. And if you want to say it's going to be, and if you want to take on the 2.7 and 1.7, that's okay with me. But if you want to change the scheme, then you should amend the ordinance and do it straight up with a public hearing the way you're supposed to. And if you want a rate card that says, here's the default rate, but based on these objective criteria, and I think those criteria exist, we're going to create either below market or affordable. And I similarly lose my grasp of the terms. Here's your rate. That's okay with me too, as a whole, if you will, scheme. But then you ought to come back as staff and say, here's what we want to do. And here's the new scheme, and we're going to adopt it straight up and publish it. And for anyone who wants to build the city, those are the rules.
Tony, can I ask you a question? What would you propose for a new scheme?
There was no part of this that said I got to go think about what the scheme is running into this meeting. And so I'm happy to go think about it. I'm with Mark. I don't think the city so desperately needs the money. It hasn't been very much money to begin with. And I don't disagree with Mark's view that the fees create high bars to develop. And so somebody can calibrate those things. I'm okay with a calibrated set of fees, but I just think this is making it up as you go along. And so I think Jim has to, under the ordinance, say, here's the appraisal, and take it to the council. Do you want to adopt it? If this is the ordinance, if you want my view is I'd adopt whatever it tells you it needs to be. I think just casually saying, nah, we're not going to do it right now is a bad idea. This is the scheme. And then if you want to come back with something comprehensive that either takes that number down or calibrates it, that's okay with me. I don't think it changes the financial trajectory of the city one lick.
Tony, I think that's well said. I would agree with that as a better philosophy than maximizing the number, which I just threw out to get some reaction, and I did, and I like the reaction from both of you.
I'm gonna thank each of you for saying what you said, because I think it has a lot of merit. I would also just like to see that before this goes to the city council, that whoever's presenting, Jim or somebody else, knows a little bit more about where we stand with, you know, the properties we've bought, or the plan, if the plan's updated, because I think the council members are going to ask those questions. And I just wanted to make clear that I believe below market rate housing deserves as much parkland around it as any other housing. So I wouldn't like that a mistake to be made that we're going to end up having below market rate housing with any less parkland next to it or with it. I don't really understand this notion of, well, we can't charge, we can waive it, but we can't pass it along. That to me just seemed a little bit inconsistent.
So if Anita's looking for guidance, I don't think you got it, or did you?
No, but your deliberations are helpful. And I only also want to clarify, these funds are not limited to being used to purchase parkland.
Right.
I think some of you have been on the Finance Commission long enough to know that most of the funds that were used to build the community center, other than the loan, actually came from this fund.
A lot of them did, certainly.
Yeah.
Because in a way, it's sort of, I mean, we're viewing the community center as sort of this urban parkland, right? It's this, it is a community asset. Hopefully it'll have a lot of trees, but it has a lot of other stuff with it as well. It's like,
yeah, what you can do with these fees is all governed by the Quimby Act.
Yeah, I think the city has made the argument that, well, because the purpose of the fees is providing park or recreational facilities reasonably related to serving the subdivision from which the fees were collected. So I guess in the case of the community center, you could say that's a citywide facility that serves the entire city. That the council made that determination.
Actually, it was the legal counsel that told the council that they could make that decision.
Yeah.
So thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really good to know where things stand. I don't know if we want to make a recommendation or you just want to bring back some of the comments that have been made.
I personally would have a rough time putting it into a motion. If Anita was looking for our discussion and got it, I think I would leave it there.
Well, technically it's Mr. Sandoval, just because I want to keep roles straight. So it's Mr. Sandoval that's accumulating the feedback.
Okay.
And I think we're all I'm in agreement with what's been said in terms of you've got the appraisals, the numbers, you've shown us what the numbers are, and then we should have the rate according to the most current information, most current, according to $11.2 million per acre.
Yes.
Seems I would have run back to my property bill right now. I think it's a little bit high, but maybe not. We're on a quarter acre.
Divided by a quarter.
Yeah, but
and then add the improvement of the house.
I think it is what it is. If he's got a bona fide appraisal, I don't think we can adjust that or recommend that it be adjusted. I think Tony said it well, that it is what it is, and we ought to do what it says we should do. And I mean, we being Jim Sandoval.
Right. So in a way, we are making a recommendation. I mean, shouldn't we
follow the numbers, follow the rules?
Yep. Yep.
Does the regulation specify how we do the valuation? Because you could calculate the market value on the actual property tax rolls, which would obviously downsize the number a bit, and it would give some credence to the fact that the parks were built a long time ago. They're in place. Why should new owners pay, an increment to put them in place when they were bought years ago? But I don't know. It's a technical question.
Yeah, I believe the appraisal is based on actual vacant land that could be entitled for park use.
No, I understand that. I just don't understand if there is some latitude to change the way we calculate that that valuation.
Is the methodology specified, or is there any decision to vary from that?
Not at this time. If if you wanted if you had a certain question about that, we could raise that to the council to, then direct the city attorney to research that, and see, because our ordinance is based on the Quimby Act. I'm not sure how flexible the Quimby Act is, but that's something the attorney would need to review.
And just last question, are we seeing an increase enough in ADUs on existing properties in Los Altos to throw the 2.7 number off per single family unit? Do you know what I mean? And on an ADU, you don't have to pay a park and lieu fee. Is that true?
I don't know the answer. So let's see, that was a twofold question. So are you asking, the first question was, does kind of this trend towards building ADUs, does that kind of
change our number to your point?
2.7.
Right. Should be increasing that 2.7 to either the 2.96 or the 2. Whatever the U.S. Census was, because it is going to be more. And then my second question was, is park and lieu, when you build another unit on your on your property, do you pay park and lieu? Do you pay park and lieu for that construction? And according to your plan that you showed us, you weren't showing us any, you were just showing us the revenue, potential revenue for multifamily construction. You weren't doing any kind of projection for single family units. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yeah. Is there some reason why you left that out? Because it's just, you never know. You don't know.
Yeah, I believe that's where most of our revenue is going to be seen. I think the single family residence is, I should know this, but I think it's for new residents. I'm not sure if it would count for a house that's scraped and rebuilt, but I'm pretty sure it's, you know, a brand new house on a that didn't exist before. I can confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll help you.
Many of those.
The ordinance says you need a subdivision map, right? So to scrape, you're not changing your subdivision map.
That's
so
true. Yeah,
I think the example here is somebody finds that, you know, 0.52 acres that has the farmhouse on it, scrapes it, does a lot split, files a new map. I think that person has created one. You know, I believe that person's created one more unit that hits this program.
Yeah, you're correct, and yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
And then I think the other, just to jump ahead, I think the issue, Martha, I don't think you're wrong on the 2.7 and 1.7. It's just baked into the ordinance. What I don't know is whether, it doesn't sound like that was dictated by the Quimby Act. It's just what we baked into our ordinance years ago. And if it's not baked into the statute, we'd be free to adjust that math to deal with density. But again, that's a decision. And again, I don't know the answer whether that's within our control to change it. But as of these 5 minutes, it's in the ordinance.
Okay. All right. Well, can we conclude on this discussion? Yep.
Yep.
All right, Helen, what's next?
So we have staff announcements. I'm just going to share my screen again.
And I'd just like to thank Jim for his presentation. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jim.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we have staff announcements. So to start off, I just want to thank both Commissioner James Martin, as well as our financial consultant, Richard Martinez. This will be their last meeting, and I just want to thank them for all their service that they have provided us over the time they have served for the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're gonna miss both, but Jim had to move away to get off of this. It's been a lot of fun, Jim, and you've been very helpful as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Agreed.
You're gonna miss all of my comments.
Well, you know, you can still call in as a member of the public.
Thanks, but I need to get in depth into the community I'm moving into. So
Yeah.
First,
okay.
and
Yeah, but thank you so much, James.
Thank you, though.
And thank you so much, Richard, for helping the department with a lot of the hard lifting, and we really appreciate it, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
So in addition to that, I just want to go over some potential future agenda items. So next month, we have the PFM presentation by Monique Spike. Currently, I only have the questions from Commissioner Flores. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email me and I'll be able to forward these over to PFM for the presentation.
I just have the hammer.
In addition, next month, we'll also go over our investment report for the quarter ending on June 30th, 2021. In the month of September, these are some items that we added. The 5-year projection and analysis, the financial system update will happen in October, and the quarterly operating budget review will also happen in October. The following 3 items were added according to the year review, the annual schedule for the different things that we want to meet and discuss throughout the year. So we're flexible in how you guys want to approach the next couple of months, but we just wanted to put it on the agenda just so that people are aware, and if they have any ideas, you guys, everyone could add to the discussion.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And then we also have the financial service director tentatively will review the city financial policy according to our last meeting's recommendations. And we are in discussion with CalPERS regarding how we want to deal with the reserve funding, as well as having Jim return and provide the Financial Commission with a final presentation on the final costs of construction. So Vice Chair, I think this is, these are all the announcements we have. Do you have anything additional to add?
Are there questions that members have for Helen?
No.
Is there any reason we can't have the CalPERS discussion in August?
So I believe Richard and John, they're reaching out to see if we can have an advisor come on board and provide us with more guidance before we have that discussion. Yes,
Yeah,
Richard.
Yeah, John has asked me to look into that, and I've sent out the word, which hopefully we'll get something here in the next week or so of who can give us some advice on what to do with that that reserve that we have.
So, Richard, additionally, isn't there an update from CalPERS about this time of year?
Yes, it usually comes out early to mid-August, the new actuary.
Yeah.
So you'll find out what your your unfunded liability.
Right. So I think a meeting after that, we ought to dig into it.
Mm-hmm,
so is that August or September? Maybe we ought to clarify that.
Yeah, I would think it'd be more September because, like I said, the report comes out around mid-August usually.
So Helen, maybe we can either add that or amend the discussion on the reserve fund. I mean, it's kind of all related.
Yes.
Yes, I could definitely make it for September. Yeah.
Could it, hey, Helen, and
yes.
Others may have a different view. Could I ask that it be an agenda item in August at a minimum to update us on process?
Okay.
Because I'm with Mark, I'm a little impatient on this.
Okay.
And I guess what I don't want to have happen is this doesn't get on our agenda again until September. And in September, the answer is, we had lots of important stuff to do and we haven't retained anybody to advise on this. So I'd like to force that update to August if I could.
Okay.
So you're saying the consultant update and then we'll get the numbers after that maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I think that's good.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely.
I agree. Let's get the direction set anyway.
Good idea.
Yes.
The numbers are going to be ugly. It's a matter of how ugly. That's
Yeah.
I don't know. Depending on equity returns.
Yeah, they may be okay up till
we're looking
yesterday.
way back. I mean, it actually could be between that and your open recs, and if you had some people retire, it actually could be okay. I wouldn't assume the numbers are all terrible, Gary. What's screwing everybody's numbers up right now is very low interest rates, which is increasing the present value of the actuarial liability.
Right.
Congress just gave private actors relief on that. I don't think we get relief in CalPERS land, but I think it's set by them what they're using. So I'm not as sure, other than we need an update because there's a lot of latency.
Lots going on. Yep.
Yeah.
Do we have any information on our financial services director?
Well, I know John mentioned to me that they conducted interviews. I don't know when that was, but he did say that to me this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, and that decision is up to our new city manager, and today is his first official day on board. So he probably wants to catch his breath before he has to make that decision.
Probably be the end of the week, huh?
Could be.
Yeah.
I was amused to hear Tony. I'm trying to figure out if he's trying to get this on the agenda for August so that he doesn't have to deal with it if he's not going to reapply. On the other hand, hoping that he's going to reapply because his, let's see, we got one, two, three people, Mr. Callback, Mr. Richmond, and Mr. Claris have terms that expire in September 2021. And you three should have received a notice from the city clerk that soliciting your reapplication for reappointment.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm actually going to hold out for a raise. I think that. Just kidding.
Gary, the per hour is unchanged.
Yeah, and the rate's doubled.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want. No, I think it's fine. I'm going to reapply.
Yeah.
Great.
You'd have to fire me.
Good. So is it not common for commissioners to interview staff members? Is that like a big no? Big no?
Especially in the financial L area.
I believe Chair Colcott actually was on the panel for last week's interview.
Oh, good.
So that was great to have him.
Yeah.
Good.
That's good representation. Okay. Great. All right. So do we have anything else that we need to go over, discuss, or can we wrap this July meeting up?
Move we adjourn.
Yes, we're good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good
Have
night.
a great
Good
evening.
night.
Thank you.